What if one artist could capture an entire nation's hopes, humor, and heartbreak, all in a single image? From small-town barbershops to the front lines of social justice. Even though his name is known around the world, he was often accused of not being a real artist. That would be the one and only Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell was born in 1894 in New York City. Unlike many modern artists, Rockwell knew early on that he wanted to be an illustrator. Rockwell found success early. He painted his first commission of 4 Christmas cards before his 16th birthday. While still in his teens, he was hired as art director of Boys Life, the official publication of the Boy Scouts of America. He attended the Chase Art School and later the National Academy of Design, and then at the Art Students League, where he studied illustration. But here's what's interesting. Rockwell didn't want to be a rebellious fine artist. He wanted to be a storyteller. And illustration, especially for magazines, was where storytelling lived in the early 20th century America. At just 22 years old, Rockwell painted his first cover for the Saturday Evening Post. That moment would shape the next 5 decades, 50 years of his life. At the start of World War I, he attempted to join the Navy but was rejected. He only weighed in at 140 pounds at the time, and at 6 feet tall, he was deemed 8 pounds underweight. But determined to serve, he gained weight overnight on a diet of bananas and donuts. He was then allowed to enlist. However, he was assigned the role of military artist rather than at a combat position. Over the course of nearly 50 years, Rockwell created 323 covers of the Saturday Evening Post. Think about that. For generations of Americans, the cover of that magazine was Rockwell's America. He painted everyday life. Kids getting haircuts, awkward teenage dates, proud grandparents, soldiers coming home. His style was hyper-detailed, warm, and often funny. He used neighbors and local residents as models, staging scenes almost like a film director before painting them. Look closely at many of his works, and you will find inspiration from the masters. Even the pose of Rosie the Riveter was inspired by Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel portrayal of the prophet Isaiah. But Rockwell wasn't just painting cute scenes. During World War II, he created the famous 4 Freedoms series, inspired by President Franklin D. Roosevelt's speech about freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. These paintings toured the country and helped raise millions of dollars in war bonds. At this point, Rockwell was one of the most famous artists in America, but fame came with criticism. By the 1950s and early 60s, the art world had changed. Abstract expressionism was rising. Artists like Jackson Pollock were redefining what, quote, serious art looked like. Rockwell, meanwhile, was labeled sentimental or boring. Critics dismissed him as merely an illustrator and not a real fine artist. But here's where his story gets powerful. In 1963, Rockwell left the Saturday Evening Post and began working with Look magazine. Rockwell had been wanting to tackle hard subjects such as civil rights, poverty, and social injustice, but wasn't allowed to. However, Look magazine was going to give him that opportunity. One of his most powerful works from this period is The Problem We All Live With. The painting shows a young black girl walking to school, escorted by federal marshals, while racist slurs are written on the wall behind her. That girl was Ruby Bridges, integrating an all-white school in New Orleans. With this painting, Rockwell did something bold. He moved beyond classic America and directly confronted America's racial tensions. This painting was so powerful that when Barack Obama was president, he had it hung in the White House. Rockwell later painted works addressing poverty and the space race. His focus shifted from small-town life to a more complex and sometimes uncomfortable reality. Rockwell wasn't just documenting America anymore, he was questioning it. Rockwell's process was meticulous. He worked from photographs, hired live models, and carefully staged scenes before ever touching a brush to canvas. Every facial expression, every wrinkle on clothing, every detail was intentional. His realism made viewers feel like they were peeking into a real moment frozen in time. Even today, his technical skill is undeniable. Whether you see him as an illustrator, a fine artist, or both, his impact is massive. Norman Rockwell died in 1978, but his legacy is far from over. Today, his work is housed at the Norman Rockwell Museum in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, the town that inspired many of his most iconic scenes. Art historians have reevaluated his work, recognizing that illustration shapes culture just as much as gallery art does. Rockwell painted over 4,000 works in his lifetime, which is incredible. Interestingly, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are avid collectors of Rockwell's work. And one of Rockwell's paintings sold in a 2013 auction when a buyer shelled out, get this, $46 million to take it home. If you enjoyed this deep dive into American art history, make sure you like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments below. Is Norman Rockwell an illustrator or a fine artist? Or is that even the right question? You tell me.